Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
So, welcome back to the next lecture, that is 14, and in this lecture we will talk about that how to measure performance in terms of behavior and standards, right. So, you remember we talked about performance, standards, okay, and three things that we talked about is identifying key accountabilities, specifying objectives, and then looking into performance standards. Now, once we have done this job, the next job is to see that how we are going to measure behavior and performance, and there are two kind of measures that is available. One is subjective, which is used for measuring behavior, and the other one is objective, which is used for measuring results. But here our focus is more on measuring behaviors, because for results they are predefined specified targets and standards, okay, against which the performance is measured. So, our focus here is on measuring more on behaviors and less on results. Now, when it comes to identifying a measurement system, that what kind of measurement approach you are going to use, there are two kind of systems that is available, that is comparative systems and absolute systems. In a comparative system, what happens, you try to compare one employee with another employees and see that whether that employee has done better or worse than the other employees. Okay. And here in absolute system, what happens, that you try to compare using certain pre-specified performance standards, right. For example, when we are going to evaluate students, we can use both kind of systems, comparative systems and absolute systems. Comparative systems are relative in the sense that we look at the performance of one student compared to other students, and that is how we evaluate them, right. Even the grading is based on this relative system. Now, when we are talking about absolute systems, we already have pre-specified standards against which the performance of each student is compared, right. For example, in a comparative system, suppose the highest score is 60 out of 100. So, the person who is getting highest would get A grade, right, and accordingly the grades of other individuals are decided depending upon the average performance of the class, right. But in absolute system, what happens, we do not compare the performance with each other, but what we do, we have already specified standards, performance standards, like we say that okay, if you 80 is the mark against above which you get A grade, right, 70 is the mark against which you will be compared, and if you get 70 and above you get B grade. So, what happens in this case, you are following an absolute system where you are comparing an individual against a pre-specified performance standard and you are measuring his performance, right. So, this is the difference between a comparative system and an absolute system. Now, these are the methods that we use to measure performance. In comparative systems, we have rank orders, alternative rank, paired comparison, relative percentile and force distribution. But when it comes to absolute measures, we have essays, behavior checklist, critical incidents and graphic rating scales, right. So, what we are going to do is that discuss each and every measurement system, whether it is related to comparative or absolute system one by one. Now, one of the advantages is that of comparative system that you can better understand, because you are going to compare one person with the other person, right. And here you are neither biased nor you are making error, because you look at the average performance of the class. Okay. Now, here you are comparing the performance of one person with the another person, and accordingly you decide whether the performance is good or bad. Okay. So, that is what is the advantage of comparative systems, but in case of absolute systems that is not there, because once you have identified a standard, okay, you have to go by it irrespective of what is the characteristics of the sample or the class. For example, suppose everybody is very good in the class, right. So, if you are going to use an absolute system, what happens? Everybody will get A or B and above, but in a comparative system what happens? You will be able to differentiate the performance better. So, you will be able to differentiate good performers from bad performers, right, which is not possible in absolute system, because everybody above 80 gets A grade, right. So, you are able to control certain things related to leniencies, severity and central tendency, right, because these are the things which are going to affect your performance, which we will discuss later on. Leniencies become you are going to be too lenient, or you are going to be very serious, very strict, or you are giving an average grade to everybody, right, that is avoided. Now, the disadvantage is basically that you can be challenged, right, because you are not measuring it against a standard, right. Okay. Another thing is that you do not know how relative the score is from one individual to another individual. For example, suppose somebody has got 60, but somebody has got 57. Okay. Now, between 58 and 60, what if you are going for relative grading, you are giving A to 60 and B to 58. This makes huge difference, right. But if you are going by absolute grading, both of them will get the same grades, right. So, what actually happens, if you are going for forced distribution, then this is a problem, right. So, you do not know what is the distance that you need to maintain in order to differentiate in the performance of the people, right. So, this could be one of the disadvantages. Now, as I told you, I am giving some examples here to explain different kind of comparative systems. In what happens, let us in simple rank order. What you are going to do here is, you are going to subjectively rank employees from best to worst. So, how it happens? It is based upon the subject matter experts and their judgment, which is very subjective in nature. So, there are 5 people, say Ramu, Gopal, Tushar and Jafar. So, what you are going to do here? You are going to rank them based on your judgment, which one is the best, then the next best, then the next one, and then finally, the last person, right. So, when you are going to compare the performance in using a simple rank order, you say that Ramu is the best performer and Jafar is the least performers, right. It is based on the ranking depending upon what their performance is, which is judged subjectively, right. Okay. So, what are the advantages of this? It is very simple, results are clear, you can very see that what is the rank of the employees, and accordingly you can identify who is the best performer, right, and who is the next best. But there are certain disadvantages. This judgment is based on just one dimension. There could be other things which are not considered here, but it is not possible to consider it there. That is why simple rank order is not used much, right. And what you are doing here, only you are ranking the performance of the individual. This say results, you are not considering the behavior, right. So, these are the problems of the simple ranking. Now, in addition to that, you adopt a different method, that is not an alternative ranking, right. Alternative ranking, what happens? So, you have a list of all employees, then supervisor select the best performer, then and again the worst performers. So, first of all what you do? You identify who is the best performer, who is the worst performer, then the second best, then the third best, second worst. So, who is going to be number 2, who is going to be number 4. Okay. So, alternating from the top to bottom, the list of all employees is prepared and ranked. Okay. Again it is simple and results are clear, okay, and you are having 2 anchors, best and worst, right, but again it is based on the dimension only. So, those who are having similar performance, sometimes it is very difficult to rank them, okay, and you are not able to specify the threshold for acceptable performance, okay, because that could be used for taking certain administrative or developmental decisions. Third one, that is the paired comparison. So, what happens in paired comparison? So, suppose there are 5 people, okay. So, you are comparing everyone with each other, right. So, if you look at the previous example, Ramu, Gopal, Tushar, Jafar, right, everybody is going, right, Gopal, Tushar, Jafar, Ramu, all of them are going to be compared with each other, right. So, you are going for paired comparison. So, the number of paired comparisons is going to be n square divided by n by 2, right. So, if there are 4 people, you are going to have 6 pairs, right. So, the comparison is like that, Ramu is compared with Gopal, Ramu is compared with Tushar, Ramu is compared with Jafar. Now, Gopal is compared with Tushar, Gopal is also compared with Jafar, and then finally Tushar is compared with Jafar. So, if you are having 4 people, you are making 6 comparison, and then you again go for ranking only, because it is a ranking, but what actually happens here, that you are going for paired comparison, you are going to pair it with everybody, each one is paired with everybody. Now, this creates a problem, provided there is a more number. If there are few people, you can compare each other, but suppose there is 12 people. So, if you are having 12 people, then the total number of comparison goes up, like you have to look at the formula, that is n square minus n by 12. So, n square means 12 is the number. So, 12 square 144 divided by n 12, how it comes, it comes out to 32, 132 divided by 2. So, it comes out to be 66. So, what I am trying to tell you, that if you increase the comparisons, then it is very difficult to do this exercise, right, because it is not possible to compare say more than 10 people at the same time. Suppose there are 100 people. So, if there is n is 100, then what happens? How many comparisons you are going to make, and in the process you are lost, it is very difficult to rank them properly, right. So, if you have having less number of people, then it is good, but if you are having more number of people, then you compare certain problems, right. That is like looking at apple and oranges, who is good, who is bad, where to put them, right. Similarly, it is very time consuming in the sense that if you have so many people, then how would you carry out this exercise. So, this is another problem. Then another method is relative percentile, right. Relative percentile is that you ask evaluators to consider all ratees at the same time and to estimate the relative performance of each using a 100-point scale. Okay. So, there are 3 people, right, Hare Ram, Dayavati, Damodar Suhar. So, these 3 people are there. So, now if you look at this, you are going to use a scale from 0 to 100 and we are going to put them into 3 categories. So, you have put HR as average, DA is between average and good, average and above average, and DS is what you call above average, right. So, for each competency you have one scale, okay, and you are going to rate or evaluate what you call the overall performance on that competency, right. It is good to use, and each competencies, for each competency you are going to have one scale on which is going to be measured, right. But it would be difficult to consider all ratees at the same time, right, because if 3-4 people are there, then you can rate them, but suppose there are 100 people for which you are going to rate on each competency, then it is a very cumbersome job and very time consuming also, right, and for each competency you are going to have different scales. Then coming to another scale which is known as force distribution. In case of force distribution, what happens? Okay. Employees are evaluated based on normal distribution. Okay. So, let me give an idea how it happens. When I am talking about normal distribution, this is a normal distribution, right, which is provided got it to 3 sigma plus 1 sigma plus 2 sigma plus 3 sigma, right, and this side also we have plus minus 1 sigma, minus 2 sigma and minus 3 sigma. The two ends never meet. So, this is the normal probability curve, right. So, what you do, this is you treat as average performers, this is what you treat as good performers, and this is what you treat as bad performers. Okay. So, what actually happens in the process, you try to use this distribution and force employees to be put into one of these categories, which may not be good. Why? Because if everybody is good, then and you are going to force them, then how would you force them into different distribution systems? If everybody is bad, then how would you identify them to be put into higher categories, right? For example, suppose you say that okay, 50 is the average score on which you are going to perform. So, 50, say 65, 80 and say 95. This side it is 35, 20 and say 5. So, the range of the scores is from 5 to 95, but suppose everybody gets 75 and above, then and you are using a forced distribution to put them into different categories. So, this is a problem. Suppose everybody is getting less than 50, then how would you force them into different categories? So, this become a problem if you are going to use a forced distribution system, right. So, in a forced distribution what happens? You need to rate some people as excellent, some people as bad. So, for example, if you look at here, 10% are rated excellent, 20% rated as good, very good, 40% as good, 20% again not very good, and 10% as bad. As I told you that everybody gets a score say 75 and 80 and above, then how would you distribute and force people to be the part of either excellent, satisfactory or very good? Suppose everybody is bad, then how would you force them to be excellent? So, this is why forced distribution is not very effective in the process, right. But many companies, since they want to promote very few people, what they do? They use this distribution and try to promote only those who are in the top 10% bracket, okay, treating them as considering them as excellent. So, others are not going to be promoted. Okay. So, basically you are trying to categorize people into different performance groups. The idea is to reward them, those who are doing very well, right, but there could be high competition. Suppose everybody is performing very well, then what will you do? Or everybody is performing very well, then it is possible to do only if the performance scores are normally distributed, as I told you. But if the performance distribution is not normal, then it is not possible, and this discourages this contextual performance, because you are looking only at task performance, right. So, it is not very good. Then from relative systems we are moving to absolute systems, and in absolute systems what happens? We are talking about 4 different kind of things, that is essay, behavior, checklist and critical incidents and graphic scales. The advantage is that you have absolute standards against which the performance is measured, and it is more accepted by employees, right. But the disadvantage is that you may be lenient, strict, or you rate everybody as average, right, and it is more time consuming than comparative systems. And when these absolute systems are developed, they are based on certain parameters. So, that is very important to understand. Now, look at it. Rating scales, this is the most common form of rating by the employees, by the organizations among the employees, right. So, what you do when you are going to rate them, basically you are looking at the performance and you have labeled numeric measuring scales like performance is measured against these 5-point scale, right. So, you are measuring overall job performance or a specific aspect of the job performance using this example. 5 is very excellent. So, if performance is very good, he get 5 rating. If his performance is very unsatisfactory, then he gets 1, right. So, this is how rating scales are used, but there are certain problems, okay, whether we are using only graphic or just words. So, and whether you want to label all the points or in the scale or label only the end points. Suppose you rate only 1 and 5. This is like this. Say for example, okay, this is a scale 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right. So, it is defined 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right. So, when 1 is excellent and this is very poor, suppose you identify only these points and these points are not identified, then if there is no description, then it is very difficult to do it, right, correct. So, you need to ensure that you are going to provide label to each one of them. Another important issue is that what does it mean to say excellent performance. So, you also not only give this, but also provide a description what does it mean to say by excellent performance, because if you are saying excellent performance, it means to say these things, because it would help the rater to evaluate the performance of a rater in a better way. Another issue, how many points in the scale should be there, whether you should go for 5 point, 7 point or what you know as say 9 point. as you increase the number of points, suppose you say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. What are the problems? As you increase the number of points in the scale, this creates more problem, and these problems are related to what? How would you label them? This becomes a problem. So, labeling the point is a problem. Labeling the point is a problem. Providing a description to these labels is a problem. Though it makes the job of a rater easy, but how would you label if you are increasing the number of points? Okay. Another issue is there, which is whether you are going to have an odd point scale or an even point scale, right. If you are going to have an odd point scale, you can have a neutral point, right. For example, if you have 9 point scale, 4 would be the neutral point, right. Another issue is related whether it is going to be ascending order or not, or whether you want to have a neutral point. So, in most cases we try to avoid even points number, because you do not have a neutral point in that case. So, it is generally recommended to have an odd point scale, not go beyond 7 point scale, because it is very difficult to provide label and description to more than 7 point scales, right. So, this is what we wanted to discuss it, that is there are issues whether you are going to label all the points or only that top 2 points, the first and the last point, whether you are going to use odd or even number of points in the scale, or whether you want to have few points or more points in the scale. So, these are some of the issues related to the rating scale, right. Now, another advantage of this is graphic rating scales, where you are going to provide label and interpretation of each dimensions are very clear. It means graphic rating, it is a advantage of rating scale that for each label that you are providing, you provide a interpretation and a meaning. So, it becomes more important and meaningful, right, but doing that is very time consuming and it requires lot of resources. Okay. Then coming to another important scale, which is a alternative, or you can say it is a more refined rating scale. This is known as behaviorally anchored rating scale. In case of behaviorally anchored rating scale, what happens? You are going to replace the vague description of a traditional rating scale with specific examples. Say for example, in case of a restaurant, there is a waiter and he is supposed to provide assistance to the customer. So, this is the one competency that is to be measured on a 5 point scale. So, look at the 5 point scale. So, here what you have done, you have tried to identify the behavior of the waiter on along these points, and each behavior or each point you are very clearly describing the kind of behavior that is happening. Though it helps the supervisor, the rater to better evaluate the employees, but the problem is that writing these kind of descriptions for each of these competencies is very difficult. For example, when you are saying customer assistance and you say that expected to volunteer to help customers, he gets better rating, but you say they could be expected to instruct soldiers and walk away when asked for assistance by the customer. So, this is a bad rating. Now, another issue is that whether the waiter is making all these behaviors or not, any of these behaviors, or he is making a different behavior and is still successful. Now, the problem is that whether you are able to capture the entire range of behavior related to customer assistance or not, and then you are making a scale. So, this is the big problem. So, the idea is that yes, you need a different scale for each category. It is good if you are able to develop job relevant measures and you are able to develop a good scale, then this is the best one, the best thing to do. But it requires lot of time and money to develop this kind of scale, and employees may not fit into the categories that you have identified. For example, he might be doing something else, but is still very successful, but that behavior is not captured, right. So, these are some of the problems related to BRS. Then behavioral checklist and the absolute method, right. So, you have a statements or behaviors against which the performance is evaluated. So, you have various competencies, okay, and supervisor what he does, he simply checks it whether this behavior is shown by you or not, right. But here you are not looking at the level at which he is being done, right. So, the advantage is that you feel impersonal and disconnected because you do not have a scale point to use, right, and you do not have detailed information, you simply say whether this behavior is shown or not shown by the employees, right. So, in that way behavioral checklists are not that effective. Essay is the most popular and the simple way to do the things, right. In essay what happens? You simply describe its strength and weaknesses. You know that many government organizations, this kind of confidential reports that supervisors write about their subordinates is a part of essay. So, they simply give a description in this confidential report in the form of essay describing the strength and weaknesses of the employees and how they can improve. It also had an advantage because you know each and every employees, what they have done, what they have not done and how they can be developed, but you may be biased also. Okay. How good you are, whether you can very good articulate and write about the employees, right. Suppose you have certain problems with the employees, then you will not be able to write good things. So, these are the issues related to the essay. Then critical incident. In critical incident what happens? You are going to collect information relate to the employees which actually lead to very effective behavior or very ineffective behaviors. So, you are going to focus on actual job behavior of the employees and see that what made him to perform well and what made him to perform poorly, right. So, you take specific examples, okay, and then you rate employees. The idea here is that you identify those critical incidents of behavior which contribute to performance of the employees. But one of the disadvantages of this method is that it is very difficult to collect critical incidents, right, because it could be very time consuming and quantification is very difficult, because how do you quantify each and every behavior in terms of measure, because ultimately you are going to use a scale, rating scale to measure the behavior. So, for each critical incident, whether it is very effective or not at all, what you are going to do? You are going to see that how it can be made more effective and you are going to do it. Thank you very much.